This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
It looks like a video of the Premier, but it's not. This clip posted on the Liberal National Party's TikTok account has been created using artificial intelligence.
This individual video might be harmless enough, but I think it represents a turning point for our democracy, a pretty dangerous turning point.
The Queensland opposition has used artificial intelligence to create a fake video of Stephen Miles busting a move to a popular Neo song as election campaigning in the state ramps up. That's from the ABC. Have you seen the video, Tom?
I have. I've watched it quite a few times, actually.
Quite a few times, really. I watched it once.
I love it.
That was enough for me.
I think it's really funny seeing a little dance around. And I can 100% confirm that is not a deep fake.
It's real?
No, I'm just saying it's not. You can't call this deep fake technology, surely.
Wait, why is it not deep fake?
Well,
I thought that's what this was.
A deep fake has to be somewhat real, right? Like it has to
No,
represent
deep fake
someone.
just means... I thought deep fake just meant that it was like a generated version of something that's real.
The only concern that we would have about a deep fake is if anyone could see it and they thought it was real. Like there's a deep fakes of Obama where they make him say stuff and you're like, oh shit, Barack Obama said this thing. No one is going to watch this video and think,
and be like,
shit, Stephen Miles
is dancing. Okay, I don't know anymore. I don't fucking know anymore because obviously you or I would watch the video and be like, this is not real. This is not Stephen Miles busting a move, as the ABC says. But there are I'm starting to wonder if that is the case for other people. First of all, I guess you have the fact that Stephen Miles has obviously hired a new social media person or people, and they've been really focusing on TikTok, and they've done quite a few. I'm going to admit they're quite funny TikToks. I don't know if they're winning votes, but they're funny. They're good. They're on trend. Like honestly, I can imagine how people would have seen those TikToks and then be like, I guess Stephen Miles is doing dances now. But also the fact that like those Vance Australia, the attack ads that they're running against the campaigns, the number of times that people clearly like see materials that are so obviously not Greens materials, and yet then they think that they are. There was that tweet from this guy who was like an Advance Australia supporter, and Advance Australia had posted about their Fuck the Greens campaign, and he posted in response a flyer that's got what do you know about the Greens? And it was clearly an attack flyer from Advance Australia, and he's like putting it in the bin. And he's like, this is what I know about the Greens. And everyone's like,
I hate the Greens,
yes. You thought you actually, you're putting your friends' flyers in the bin. But that's what I mean. People do not have the skills to tell truth from fact, it seems.
but I mean, we should say the text on this TikTok from the LNP is POV, my rent is up $60 a week, my power bill is up 20%, but the Premier made a sandwich on TikTok. And then he's doing the little dance. Okay,
maybe not this video in particular. Maybe not. But like, I don't fucking know anymore. I don't know. I don't know what people know and what they don't. What do you think about like the very serious response to this though, right? Because Stephen Miles is, what did he say? It's appalling and disgusting that David Crisafulli, the LNP leader, has stooped to using AI and deepfake videos to attack me. Mr. Crisafulli needs to explain why he thinks this is okay. It's a test of his character. Appalling and disgusting, Tom?
No, it's just the normal bullshit that happens in political campaigns.
Yeah.
It's all just fine. It also undermines its own argument. Like you can't be like, oh, look at the Premier talking about bullshit on TikTok when you're posting a TikTok video as well. Like couldn't you say the argument or your
what is your plan also to limit rent increases, LNP? I'd love to hear it.
Yes, because you're just posting on TikTok as well.
Yeah, they're like,
this
rent.
other guy sucks.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Oh, I hate to pay rent to fellow youths. Do you think we should ban deepfakes like other countries have done?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, the article in the ABC goes on to say the AEC is basically powerless as long as it's signed off or whatever. There's no sort of truth.
Which it is. It's labelled as AI and it's authorised. So
right. Okay, so there you go. It's all out there. I mean, I think the serious deepfake stuff, the stuff that I've seen that actually makes you go, oh shit, is the stuff in which voices and faces are manipulated.
Hello, I'm Stephen Miles. I'm resigning.
Yes.
Or like,
yes.
I'm a pedophile. I don't know.
I look forward to handing over all of Queensland to Lydia Thorpe or whatever. I don't know, whatever the fuck they're going to put out there. But like, when it's like when they're, or them saying something that's slightly off kilter, that's
intended to deceive.
Right, that kind of vibe. That's the stuff that I do find a bit more terrifying. Yes, and making that illegal probably wouldn't be an issue. I mean, we've got truth in election advertising laws on the books, or trying to make their way through Parliament at the moment. But that'd be federal, I suppose, but not state. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, definitely not a thing yet. I guess that's the thing, and I doubt that they would be broad enough to cover something like this. I feel like, truth in political advertising and deepfakes are slightly different though, because when you think about it, a deepfake, you can definitively say like, yes, this is either a AI generated video or content, or it's not, and you can ban that. Whereas like truth, a much more difficult thing to definitively regulate against. But anyway, the only other thing that I find funny about AI is that like I had this revelation watching this video of Stephen Miles that deepfakes are like, it's like the new caricaturist, where it's something about it that it highlights the parts about you that you are like insecure about, or the way, it's like the information that it gathers and then emphasizes. Right. It's like he does look like a little baby, and he just for some reason looks especially like a little baby that's kind of been blown up, and he looks especially like goofy and silly, which Stephen Miles does look like, but the AI is like, yeah, we know you're the goofy silly guy, we can do that, here's your extra goofy silly Stephen Miles. And there's, I don't know, there's something particularly human about that in a way.
We've run the algorithm on this, and you baby.
You baby.
Do the Greens actually have any idea what they're on about? It's like they just drum up these ideas, they come up with it in a dream, and then suddenly they're trotted out in front of the media. It's just absolutely bizarre.
We're stuck with the hosts of Chapo Shithouse podcast.
Serious danger to Australia.
We baby. You baby, we all baby. It is Serious Danger, a podcast about Greens politics in Australia. It is not an official Greens Party podcast. It is made possible with the help of the Green Institute and produced by Michael the Griffin. Hello everyone, Tom Ballard here. Still in Colonisation Central, and Emerald is back. Hi Emerald.
Are you in Colonisation Central? Yeah, is it Colonisation Central if you're where the colonisers live or where they colonised?
Oh gosh, good point.
But anyway, as usual, I'm in Meanjin, I'm on Yuggera and Turrbal country. And this week, we are talking about the Australian freaking out over the Greens housing policy and how we're going to destroy housing prices, and a public developer announcement in Queensland. And then I think you're going to talk to me about US politics or something.
We're the only leftist podcast with the guts to cover this issue.
That's right.
Even though Emerald dismisses the politics of America, our greatest
American problem, don't want to know. I can't say it any more strongly.
But what about if Australia is mentioned? Would that interest
American
you at all?
problem, don't want to know.
Thanks for coming back, Emerald. Big thanks to Asta Hill for co-hosting the show last week. NT Greens candidate, absolute legend. I loved finding out about Northern Territory politics, as batshit as it is, and was really inspired to hear about all the cool stuff that's happening on the NT Greens. And they've tripled their membership in the past 18 months. For God's
Very
sakes,
cool.
Emerald.
Yeah.
I was a dum-dum during that conversation. Bit of a correction, thanks to all the wonderful listeners and patrons for calling me out and correcting me on this. The Northern Territory has a population of 246,500 people, and that is a smaller number than the population of the ACT. They have 431,215 people. I'm sorry.
Something you probably could have just Googled before you made wildly misleading claims on this podcast.
That was a deepfake video, actually, of me saying
that. Was a deepfake video of you making that false claim. Look, thank you to our new patrons over the last week, Billy and Tamik. We love you very much. We just put out another Patreon episode, bonus content on Inside the Greens. This time, I read the chapter 5, Breaking Through. We get halfway through, and we talk about Greens in Parliament after the Greens were federated. We talk about them in the WA, even though we didn't win any from the Australian Greens. The WA Greens were doing interesting and cool stuff, and apparently being advised by Gough Whitlam. So that's a great episode. If you become a patron, you get access to all of our back catalogue of bonus episodes like that, where we read books and interview interesting people and deep dive on cool topics. And also it's only $3 a month, and it helps. Well, it's the only reason the show can continue running. So we very much appreciate all our patrons.
Look, also today, the Queensland Greens have announced a housing plan that pushes private developers aside and introduces a government-owned property developer. The party says 100,000 homes could be built to sell or rent below market prices over the next 6 years, and it claims renters would save $9,000 per year, first home buyers $225,000 off the purchase price of an average home. I had a chat with Australian Greens Housing and Homelessness spokesperson Max Chandler-Mather and asked how a public property developer would do their job. Like, what's the incentive to own a house then? Because if it's only going to go back
to have a roof over your head, Kelly.
Yeah, I know, but
I think I think your question really reveals one of the big unintended or unacknowledged or unconscious biases in the conversations about housing. Look, I think a lot of people, why they want to buy a home is to get security so that you have a roof over your head, that you don't have to deal with a landlord, that you can make renovations or changes to the home. It's your place to raise your family, to do what you like. It's not a lucrative investment. Like, actually, where it is a lucrative investment often is for property investors. Now, I think, there's been the Australian today called me extreme because I said the Greens don't want house prices to keep increasing. But actually 85% of people, when asked, say they either want house prices to go down or stop increasing, even homeowners. Because at the end of the day, what they don't want is a housing market where their kids and their friends and their family can't afford to buy a house. What they want is a society that sort of replicates what happens around the world, where you buy a home to put a roof over your head and live a good life, not to turn into this crazy Ponzi scheme where house prices continue to increase and the only people who really benefit are the banks who are recording record profits at the moment for property development.
That's Max Chandler-Mather from the Australian Greens.
Alrighty. On Tuesday this week, we woke up to another lovely front page from our national newspaper, The Australian. Running a story with the headline, quote, "A real twist, Greens squeeze on home values."
Now, it was sort of flagged with extreme greens. Is this like a series?
Okay, let's do this. Let's do this front, because I also, yes, it's got this little graphic and it's like part of a series, Extreme Greens.
Yeah.
In the article, it says, in an interview with The Australian as part of a series exploring the Greens policy platform. And I was like, what is that? So they've obviously just decided they're just blatantly just running this series opposing the Greens. And I did wonder if this is coordinated with Advance Australia. Like, surely, because I then went and looked at the Advance Australia Twitter and sure as day follows night, the Oz has run these it's run articles over at least the last couple of weeks, sometimes one every day, consecutive days in a row, and they will all be on the front page with this little Greens logo about the Extreme Greens. And fuck, I screenshotted them, but then I put them on my other computer. But they'll just be like Greens Council or Greens Mayor's anti-Semitic rant or anti-Israel rant, and then the other one was like Greens members deserting the party due to anti-Semitism, and then it'll be like Greens radical plan to desert our closest ally or something. Like, they're all just clickbait attack headlines on the Greens that make perfect content if you were perhaps an organisation that wanted to run a campaign against the Greens that is primarily consisting of attack headlines. And so they just run them in the Oz, and then Advance Australia takes them and puts them on a square and posts them on Twitter. So I'm like, wow, what a wonderful media machine
ecosystem. Here. Look, everyone, this unbiased media source agrees with us in our position that the Greens might be too left-wing. But who is it for? Who are the Greens voting Australian readers that are having their minds changed by these series?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, maybe they are like, they think of the Greens. It's the same. It's the same objective, surely, as Advance Australia, where they're like, maybe there are some older people in Australia who think, hey, I'd like my kids to have like a safe and, secure future. Maybe I will vote for this party that's offering an alternative that might allow them to do that. And I support the environment. And Advance Australia and the Australian, the newspaper, are like, well, we have an audience of those people and we just need to scare the shit out of them and remind them to not fucking do that. And the Greens are dangerous and really bad.
Brilliant. Because they're going to attack the value of the family home.
The value of the family home. That's right. So the article reads, Greens housing spokesman Max Chandler Mather has made clear the minor party's policies are aimed at achieving a real decline in housing values over time to ensure the next generation has a better chance of buying a home. Sounds good, right? The end.
Wonderful news, everyone.
Yeah. I mean, like, this is fucking. I think this is actually kind of monumental. Like, it's, what am I trying to say? Momentous. It is kind of momentous. I think that we have said on this show before, certainly I've said that, like, the crux of the housing policy debate that we have been needing to get to for years and have kind of struggled to get to is this question of politicians and, you know, industry leaders, etc. Do you want housing prices to go down? Yes. And it's only been in the last year or even less that we have finally got there. And this is, I think, the most pointy example of us actually putting that on the table and saying, well, do you want housing prices to go down? The nuance, of course, is do you want housing prices to go down in real terms? Do you want them to quote unquote stabilize? But this is something that the major parties, they can talk about how they want more affordable housing, and yes, they want a roof over everyone's head and all of that as much as they want. But will they actually say, we don't want housing prices to keep going up? And they won't.
No. I mean, looming over this is the famous John Howard quote, which is, no one's ever come up to me on the street and said, John Howard, you're the worst because you made the value of my house go up. And we know the history of neoliberalism is people's wage power declining or wages being flat. And so the only way that lots of ordinary people feel like their wealth is going up is by the constant increasing value of their house. Cue housing crisis, right? And that's been the stickiness of it. Perhaps the most extreme or the most staunch position you would have is a Labor MP saying we need to slow the growth in house prices, for example. So
go up, but a little.
They probably believe, slowly ticking up year after year, but it's got a little bit crazy of late, so let's all just settle down.
Yeah, you're right. This is like the underlying assumption around the fear of saying that you think house prices should not keep going up or should even go down in real terms or otherwise, is that it is the number one asset for the vast majority of normal Australians. And if house prices go down, then their wealth declines, really. But that's why, like, I think it was really interesting that I hadn't seen this essential poll that came out, apparently, this is from April this year, that shows far greater support for house prices stabilizing or going down than I would have expected. Have you seen this poll?
No.
Okay, so the question, pretty simple. Would you like to see house prices continue to rise, reduce, or stabilize? The overall, only 15% say they would like them to continue to rise.
Nice.
45% say they want them to stabilize. And 40% say they want house prices to reduce.
Hell yeah.
That's pretty wild, right? Yeah, that is not, I think, what the major parties certainly would think that the voting population would want. I mean,
keep in mind 33% of people are renters, so and a huge chunk of them, and the majority, we believe, majority of renters are renters because they can't afford to buy a house, so they're very much keen to see those prices go down. Then you've got all the materially secure parents who look at the state of things for their kids and they say, yeah, this is absolutely crazy, surely they got to go down.
You say that about renters, but this is the interesting thing, that even you can toggle the results in the poll. And even for mortgage holders, almost 80% want them to stabilise or reduce. So 51% want them to stabilise and 28% want them to reduce. And actually, for people who don't have a mortgage anymore, who own their home outright, the figures are even higher in terms of supporting them house prices stabilising or reducing. Like, amazing. There are some obvious breakdowns. If you look at it by age, obviously far greater numbers, like it goes down in proportion of how much you want, what proportion want them to stabilize or reduce as they get older, because obviously home ownership grows. But it's not that much of a change. Like, in the 18 to 34-year-old group, 17% want them to continue going up. And then even among the 55 pluses, it's only 14%. And like 55% of that group want them to stabilize. So it's, I think it's pretty stark. The only, of course, if you look at it by people who own an investment property, those who own at least one investment property, 29% want them to keep going up. 50% want them to stabilise, and 21% want them to reduce. But still, more than 70% want them to stabilise or reduce when they have got an investment property. Like, they have invested in this asset, and yet they're like, look, I think it will probably be good if they at least stabilise.
Now, do you think stabilise could be interpreted to mean that kind of slow, gradual
Slow
growth
down
over a long period of time?
That's right. Stabilise is a bit of a nebulous term, right?
Yeah.
And like, I mean, this is what I think it's interesting, the terminology. So
unless they say, I just want my house price to go up by the value of inflation every single year. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like that would be the only, like, that would be the true stabilization, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes. Stabilise is vague. That's right. And so it's kind of unsurprising that is the category that's got the most support. But again, not by that much, 45% versus 40 overall for stabilise versus reduce. But yeah, I mean, stabilise was used a little bit in the Greens kind of communications. But it seems like they are actually talking about a real decline in housing values, by which they mean the value relative to wages, right? And so they're not necessarily saying that if you bought your house for $500,000, the following year we think it should be worth $480,000, but that maybe it would still be worth $500,000, or it would only be worth $510,000 as opposed to $550,000, way outpacing wages. So that's where that kind of the distinction between, like, I'm sure there would be more bolshy people who say, actually, maybe housing prices, because they have overtaken wages so much, they probably do need to go down right now, at least, to allow wages to catch up. But the Greens haven't gone as far as saying that, but they're saying that, in terms of proportionate to wages, the real value is going to need to decline.
Yeah, and surely it's also, this is the implication of the policies that we seek to enact too, right? Like, we, unlike the private developer industry and the real estate industry that are very much indeed invested in the idea of the values of houses constantly going up, this housing bubble being formed, we want to do policies that hack away at the values that will reduce the price of housing. That's actually what you do to address the affordability problem.
Yes.
So it's not just like, hey, cut the price of houses, ha 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 ha, but it's also like our vision for what the housing market or the provision of housing should look like in Australia will inevitably mean that the values of them don't become a massive asset that overinflates and overleverages people and builds that bubble.
Yeah, because fundamentally it's about whether you treat housing as a place to live or as an investment that is primarily designed to increase in value. And I mean, so this article came out same day that in Queensland the Greens launched their plan for a publicly owned property developer, similar to the federal policy that was announced, but somewhat, I think goes into a little bit more detail on some aspects, and really is about reframing. That's right, like reframing the way that we treat housing and introducing a player to compete with private property developers who just want to make money that is actually fundamentally concerned with giving people a home. So, I mean, you said you had heard of this, so you allowed me to speak about this Queensland policy. So I have had my Queensland brain checked. I'm assuming that people in other states care about this and want to hear about it, right?
I think people who listen to this podcast love the Queensland Greens, want to hear updates on how it's going. We've got the state election coming out in October. We've got deep fakes all over the place. We want to know what kind of policies, folks are rolling out and sort of campaigning on, for sure. Yeah.
Well, okay, so this is elections in October, that's right. They launched this plan. Public developer would it would manage the construction of 100,000 public homes over 6 years. So it would acquire land, buy new lots. We would prioritize buying some of those 99,000 sites that private developers are currently sitting on. So there are 99,000 approved dwelling sites in Queensland that developers just aren't building. But of course, it's the planning restrictions that are holding back, even though they've got all those approved sites. But anyway, so they could buy up a bunch of those where the land is just sitting there because the developer's obviously land banking it, and then they could manage the construction of these homes. I mean, my first, I have to admit, when I hear 100,000 homes, I'm a little bit automatically like, that sounds like too many. That sounds fake. But then when you consider that there are these 99,000 approvals that are already sitting there across the state, plus there's 580,000 sites that are zoned for homes in Queensland, it does seem eminently achievable. As I understand it, this plan would mean like a 30% increase in current construction levels in Queensland, which are stagnant, and that is part of the problem, as we know, that we need more homes to house people. So it probably does, like, it is the scale of housing construction that we need. Certainly we have about 43,000 people currently waiting on our public housing wait list, and both major parties, bless them, have exactly the same commitment so far in terms of social housing, which is 53,500 over 20 years. So they might just get, the current level of social housing need in 20 years. And I'm sure that won't change anytime before then.
And I mean, that list is only going to get bigger, right? Like the population forecasts, I think, for Queensland are pretty massive. Like people are moving to Brisbane and particularly in the southeast. But generally, I think the population for Queensland in the future is set to increase. Plus, everyone's going to want to be there for the Olympics, So
well, everyone's going to want to be there for the Olympics. Well, it'd be interesting to see if like the discourse around Olympics 2032 in Brisbane changes now that we've got Olympics fever and excitement because it's actually on or whatever. But yes, to come back to so 100,000 homes, 70% of them available to rent, and 30% of them would be available to buy. The rentals would be capped at 25% of household income or 70% of market rates, whichever is lower. And then the houses to purchase, it's a little less clear to me, but it basically they've just said at just above cost, and estimated that would save the average first home buyer about $225,000 on their home.
And forgive me, dumb question here. For these kind of sales, is there an auction? No, there's no auction, is there? Because it's sort of at a set price. How?
Yeah, I guess it would be. That's a really good question. I mean, I know like the big distinction and one of the most important parts of the plan, right, is that they're available to anyone. So it would be like a lottery. So I guess you would just apply to go into the draw to get one of these homes for the price that has been set based on the cost that it actually that the state expended, the public developer expended to deliver it. And then once you've bought it, you can only sell it back to the scheme at the purchase price plus CPI, inflation. You can't rent out the whole home. There's some provision apparently to like temporarily rent out a room in your home, but you could only do it capped at 25% of household income. So I guess, if you had a friend or family member who wanted to stay, then you could give it to them, but it would still be for the discounted rent. But the fact that, like it's universal lottery system, obviously very different to the way that we treat social housing currently. And part of the rationale is that you create like diverse mixed communities where, lawyers are living next to nurses, are living next to teachers, are living next to retail workers, because you've got a mix of incomes, but their rents are all capped proportionate to the incomes. And so instead of concentrating disadvantage like we do now, because you can only get social housing if you are in the most absolute dire circumstances, and even then you often don't. But then you get all this concentrated disadvantage, which is why people kind of associate public housing and social housing with like quote unquote ghettos or like really poor quality housing.
I love the idea of someone objecting to it being a lottery system. That's ridiculous. It's like, what do you think capitalism is? Like, what do you think we're currently living under? But a lottery system where you're born and the wealth of your parents determines whether or not you can afford a house. This is a democratically administered, state-sponsored lottery system that makes far more sense and is actually way more fairer.
Yeah. And I think that the idea is that you would clear the social housing waitlist first. So I think you would give priority probably to people on that waitlist now, but then it would open up to anyone. And it's worth noting as well, like that even though it's 100,000 public homes, like that's a really ambitious undertaking, but it would only bring the proportion of social housing in the overall housing supply in Queensland to about 7% over 6 years. In Austria, it's around 60%. So like it is a long project to undo the privatization of the housing market, the outsourcing to the private market that we've done with housing. But it would be a start in kind of reframing the way we think about housing and public housing as well. It would not be cheap. Did you see the price tag, Tom? How much would you estimate that this would cost?
Well, I can see it in the notes here.
Can you?
I'd guess about $5 billion a year over 6 years.
No, you've read the wrong thing. I deliberately didn't write the figure in the show notes.
Oh, okay, nice.
It's a $60 billion investment over the 6 years. So 20 billion of that would come from government spending, which would be from the increased revenue that comes in from the Greens plan to raise mining royalties.
Right.
20 billion would be state borrowing, and 21 billion roughly comes from the income that you get from buying and renting the houses. So the $5 billion a year is the income that it would be expected to generate after 6 years. So that would then be used, like you would pay off the $20 billion in borrowing over the life of the 100,000 public homes. But you would need to initially borrow a bunch, spend quite a lot of money. But again, like, it's fucking possible if you were willing to actually tax big corporations fairly, like the enormous mining giants that we have in Queensland who export many, many, many billions of dollars worth of resources and pay like whatever it is, 9% of that in royalties.
Clive Farmer's got like 6 houses just in Queensland, take some of them.
Yeah, it just takes, well, probably. He's probably sitting, I wouldn't be surprised if Clive Palmer is land banking some properties that maybe the public developer could come in and say, hey, I noticed that you've got some land sitting there that you are simply not delivering homes for. So we'll take that and we'll fucking build beautiful, well-designed, accessible, sustainable public homes that anyone can live in.
Yoink. Well, if I can ask one last question to you on this, and I mean, just to go back to this Australian article, because I think it's important to just underline, the headline was, your home will be worth less with us, Greens.
Yeah.
Advance Australia was saying the Greens housing policy will deliberately lower the value of your home.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know we talked about that polling there, about it's surprisingly not as politically toxic as you might imagine. But I suppose, I don't know, do you think these kind of hit pieces, these Extreme Greens series, have some kind of effect? Because obviously the reason why politicians are very hesitant to say, the value of your house is going to go home is because there is a substantial amount of the home owning population that would be concerned about that kind of reduction in their wealth or their material living standards, you say, if the value of the house goes down as outlined in these policies. I don't know. Do you think this stuff can land? Is it an attack that we need to be wary of, or do we just sort of embrace it and say, yep, that's exactly what we want to do because housing's fucked?
Yeah, I don't think that particular attack is effective. I think there are other attacks that maybe are effective. Like, I think there are more effective attacks, for example, around, I don't know, defunding police even, honestly. I think that's more effective when people are concerned about crime. But it's like, if you look at the concerns that people have, it's actually not like it's in Queensland, the top election issues, right, are cost of living, housing, and crime or community safety. And when they talk about cost of living and housing, that's not actually, I'm concerned that like my wealth, the value of my assets is going down, right? It's that we have an inflation crisis and we have a cost of living crisis, and like the price of everything is going up. So if you're talking about the price of things going down, I think that's actually directly responding to the concerns that people have in a way that neither of the major parties are doing. So no, I don't think it's a particularly effective attack. And I think it actually creates a useful platform to talk about why the Greens are proposing a different solution and like a fundamentally different approach to the housing crisis that would actually make a difference when people have been let down by successive governments again and again, telling them that they're going to make it easier for them and for their kids to buy a home and not actually doing that, because fundamentally they're just leaving it to the private market and to private developers who just want house prices to go up because that's how they make their money, because that's why they're designed, that's what they're created for. Whereas something like a public developer is designed to give people homes, places to live.
And that lie can't hold. It can't hold up to scrutiny, right? Any person with a brain could look at this situation and say, there's no way you can both be for reducing housing unaffordability and also have the position that everyone's house prices should keep going up and up in value year on year.
And especially the way they are. Yeah.
Yes.
Kamala.
Hello. Hi.
Hey there.
Oh, hi, you're both together. Oh, it's good to hear you both.
We called to say Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and to do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you both. It means so much. And we're going to have some fun with this too, aren't we?
All right, enough about the politics of the greatest state in Australia. Let's talk about the politics of the greatest country in the world, the US of A. USA. Now, what's your position again? You just don't care about America. You just have no time for it. What's your vibe?
We're trying to peek behind the curtain to the weekly podcast planning phone calls that Tom and I have, where he's like, so this thing happened in America. And I'm like, Tom, every podcast is going to be talking about this. Surely people listening to this right now subscribe to multiple other podcasts that have an intimate and on the ground knowledge of America and are going to talk about that. And we are going to come in and try and do a better job. But hey, maybe we're smart enough. Maybe we can do it. I don't know.
Well, if nothing else, we just talk about the crazy funny shit and laugh at that. Have you seen this clip of Donald Trump talking about insane asylums?
I hadn't. And this is what I have to say. Maybe you can just, look, if we're going to do this, you can just tell me the funnest things that have happened, because I truly do just switch off. I pretend I do not see it. So tell me the fun stuff. Give me a laugh.
Well, hang on. There's something else going on there. I mean, you obviously don't check out yourself personally on US politics because you're on a podcast and other podcasts are talking about
listeners. It. Yeah.
But you also you also have a relationship in which you find it boring, or you just don't give a fuck. It's too crazy. What do you think?
It is more actually. It is a what's the word? It's a strategic and practical decision, because I don't have brain space to pay attention to US politics when I have to know all the things about Queensland politics especially, and then sometimes Australian politics. So it's more just, no brain space, sorry.
Fair enough. All right, here we go.
Prisons and jails, mental institutions, and insane asylums. They go crazy when I say the late, great Hannibal Lecter. Okay, they say, why would he mention Hannibal Lecter? He must be cognitively in trouble. No, these are real stories. Hannibal Lecter from Silence of the Lamb. He's a lovely man.
He's lovely.
He wants to have you for dinner. He'd like to have you for dinner.
Okay. So explain to me, what is the point that he's making?
I mean, that's an incredible task that you've given me there to try and explain this, but he's been talking about Hannibal Lecter so much on the campaign trail.
Really?
It's not clear whether he's aware that Hannibal Lecter is a fictional character, but
why has he been talking about him a lot? In what context?
He's talking about migrants coming over the border and they're escaping from mental institutions and insane asylums.
Oh, people like Hannibal Lecter?
People like Hannibal Lecter
are
the late
escaping
great Hannibal
and
Lecter
coming across the border into the States.
Yes, and he wants to have you over for dinner, and he thinks this is so funny, and he keeps saying it again and again and again. He said it in his Republican National Convention speech. It's extraordinary. But that pronunciation of insane asylums, I can listen to all day.
Well, yeah, but this is what this is kind of what I mean. I mean, we talk about deep fakes. My boyfriend pointed out to me recently that I have a real tendency I think everything on the internet is fake. He often shows me things and I'm like, that's AI, isn't it? That's not real. And he's like, no, it's real. But I never think anything is real. I would watch this and be like, oh, it's just AI. That's not, AI. Trump didn't say that. Disregard.
I think you're overestimating AI's abilities and you're underestimating Donald Trump's insanity.
It's just easier for me if I can just pretend it's all fake.
Whenever you see the Greens do anything cringe, it's AI. It's all fake.
That's AI for sure.
All right, what about the JD Vance couch fucking stuff? Has this entered your orbit at all?
Can you also explain to me, who is JD Vance? I've been hearing about this man a lot. I hear this name a lot. Does he have something also to do with, is he not a clothing designer? Who am I confusing it with? Who's JP Morgan? All the Americans are the same to me. Are they the same?
Morgan is a bank. Oh my God.
Who am I thinking of that does the clothes of the department stores or something? Is that JD Vance?
No, I think I vaguely have some idea of what you're going for. But no, JD Vance is Donald Trump's vice president nominee, although that could change because apparently Trump is very upset. JD Vance wrote a book called The Hillbilly Elegy, which was very popular in the wake of Trump's election.
Yeah, right. And now he's running for it with him.
Yes,
That's nice.
He was a classic never Trumper dude, and then he had his MAGA conversion moment. He's an absolute piece of shit. But the big story about him this week has been the idea that he once fucked a couch. Okay,
Fucked a couch.
fucked a couch. From
Okay.
Olivia Craighead writing in The Cut. On July 15th, Vance was announced as Donald Trump's running mate. Shortly after, ex-user Rick Rude's Calves, whose account is now private, wrote, "Can't say for sure, but he might be the first VP pick to have admitted in a New York Times bestseller to fucking an inside-out latex glove shoved between two couch cushions. Vance, hillbilly elegy," and puts the page numbers. It's an indictment on Vance's demeanor that so many people believe this without question, but it is, in fact, a lie. So this guy totally made up the idea that that's what JD Vance admitted about in his book. It's a complete lie, but it did spur just a wave of memes. Everybody's trying to make this a thing. It's a real Scott Morrison shat his pants at Macca's kind of vibe.
Yeah, okay. Engadine Macca's, gotcha.
People posting stuff like, "No, JD Vance, that's not what intersectional means." JD Vance deliberately getting in trouble with his wife so he could spend the night on the couch, which I thought was quite good.
That's funny.
And the Associated Press did like a fact check on this. They posted an article saying, "No, JD Vance did not have sex with the couch." And they then took that piece down afterwards because it didn't meet their editorial standards.
Because they can't definitively say that he hasn't fucked a couch.
Indeed. I guess you could say, fact check, he did not write about this in the
Hillbilly
Elegy.
In his book.
But who knows?
Just gone with that. Yeah, I can't understand why anyone would have trouble discerning what's real and what's not on the internet these days.
That's true. That's a good point. And yeah, full credit to all the memes based on a total lie, but it's good stuff to get out there. But yeah, JD Vance, no good, truly terrible.
Good.
And
but why is Trump mad at him?
Trump is mad at him because, well, the fact that he picked JD Vance is crazy. He picked JD Vance is the VP pick you make when you think you're definitely going to win. When it was all Joe Biden, he's going to die. He's old man. Everybody hates him. Trump's just survived assassination. Hey, I'm going to go with JD Vance. He's like the MAGA pick. But he doesn't get him really anything massive. Like a VP pick is supposed to bring you a state, shore you up your support in a state where you might be lacking. JD Vance doesn't really do any of that. And JD Vance is just a real zero. Yeah, he's bad at speaking. He doesn't get people excited. He stinks.
Oh, okay, cool.
But of course, the big story was Joe Biden stepping down, thereby making him an incredible American hero and the best man in the world. And Kamala Harris is pretty much locked in to take over as the replacement candidate. Joe Biden's going to focus on being president as much as he can focus on anything at the moment.
Yeah.
And Kamala Harris is taking over in a incredibly transparent and democratic process. What you surely must be across this story. I'd be interested in what you may have thought.
I am aware. I'm aware that this has happened. Is it just that? So they still haven't actually formally pre-selected or whatever they do, primary selected their presidential candidate. Is that right?
No,
they just have leaders that are pretty clear.
Yes, all the Democratic elites are lining up to. Joe Biden himself endorsed Kamala Harris. All the elites, lots of unions, lots of factions are endorsing them. They then have the convention coming up. The primary process is you win delegates, right? And then the delegates go to the convention and they say, "We pledge all our votes for Joe Biden because
when's the convention?
In August, I believe, in a few weeks."
Okay.
There was a point at which they were going to confirm Biden's nomination prior to the convention to try and quell all this distrust or whatever. But I think that's now been pushed back to allow Kamala enough time to shore up support and make it clear that the party's united around her.
And hasn't she fundraised, like record-breaking fundraising, right, in the last week?
Yes, after the switch or after Biden stepped down, something like $80 million in one day, hundreds of thousands of people signing up. I think you would have to say that there has been an explosion of enthusiasm for Kamala Harris, whether that's people are crazy about Kamala Harris or they just hated Joe Biden and don't want Donald Trump.
I mean, the endorsement tweet from Charlie XCX, that's really something.
Oh, she got on board. Okay, that's good.
You didn't see this? That's what I saw. Yeah, that was the thing that probably my feed is mostly just that Charlie XCX tweeted Kamala Harris is Brat.
Okay.
Which is obviously one of the greatest endorsements that you can get right now. And
what is Brat? I'm sorry, I don't know what Brat is. What is Brat?
That's her album. Her very of the moment new album.
And what's
the green square with the word brat and everyone's saying
no, I've seen that. Yes. Okay. Yeah. But I thought what is interesting when we can provide a unique and interesting take is the Greens angle on all this. Adam Vance responds to the news on X, tweeted this. A second Donald Trump term would be dangerous for the climate, for already marginalised communities, and for the growing threat of far-right extremism. I hope Americans use their voting power in the upcoming election to stop this from happening. Big respect to Joe Biden for making what would have been a very difficult decision overnight. The new Democratic presidential candidate must do all they can to keep Trump out of office.
What?
Some people did not enjoy this. Tom Rowie on X replied, "You don't need to respect genocide, Joe." Former Serious Danger guest Hero Badge tweeted, "Counterpoint, we do not got to hand it to war criminals."
Yeah.
And checkifitswoke.com tweeted, "This is a joke, right? He didn't make any decision at all." I know this sort of probably falls into your category of why tweet this?
Unnecessary tweets. And I want to know, okay, I've given you some passes, but I'm actually starting to, if you are listening to this podcast right now and you are the person who's responsible for all the obligatory Adam Bant tweets, come forward. Talk to me about it, because I don't understand why you're doing this and it's annoying me. There's no one asked you, Adam. No one asked Adam what he thought about this. Like, why tweet? It's not necessarily the substance of the tweet. Like, I don't, there's all the conversations we can have about whether you should swing in behind like the Democrats or swing in behind Kamala because they've got a fucking cooked first past the post system and blah, blah, blah. But also the Democrats are fucked and she's a former cop and prosecutor who's responsible for the incarceration of many black men and blah, blah, blah. But like, that's a separate question. But like, why tweet? Why tweet? I just don't understand it.
The only reason to release a statement on this is to draw some kind of political angle out of it, right? Or to make some broader point or to express
what is the angle?
A political message that makes some sense. I would argue that is not clear.
And this is and actually that's the thing, like even the tweet is very unclear, right? It's like, I hope Americans use their voting power to stop this, another Trump term, from happening. What does that mean? Who should they vote for? Should they vote for the Greens? Wouldn't that be the normal thing that you would say? But obviously, that would maybe make it more difficult for them to keep Trump out of office because they got first past the post. So you can't really say that. So you're just kind of being like Trump bad. You really didn't need to tweet that. I think everyone knew, Adam, that you don't like Trump.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. And yes, I mean, it somewhat muddies the waters, or at least the attempt by Adam Bant, by lots of people across the broad progressive world, to, I suppose, from their point of view, praise or give credit to Joe Biden for this one specific decision is viewed by many, completely understandably in my view, as a level of endorsement, giving him a free pass, or ignoring the fact that he's playing a role in a genocidal war.
Why do you need to? Yeah, this is not your mate who has stepped down. This is not a Greens MP who has stepped down. It's literally nothing to do with you, and it's not someone you support. You don't need to be like, what a brave decision. And I mean, honestly, kind of like, it's a somewhat valid point as well from like checkifitswoke.com. Like, not really, but it's like, but what do you mean? Wow, so brave of you to step down. It's like,
yes, he only did that because his top advisors came to him and showed him polling that he had no path to victory. Okay, he hung on to power. He refused to listen. He did these more dog shit train wreck interviews. He said the only way he would step down is if the God Almighty told him to do so. And then his aides come along and say, "Bro, you old. Everyone hate you. You got no path to victory." And he said, "I'm going to take the brave decision to step down now."
Yeah. And what's so good about that? I don't understand what's so good about that.
Yes, I mean, that is being spun into, wow, really putting him,
because he's saving America from Trump.
Well, yes.
Is that like by leaving, he's saving America from Trump? But that doesn't even make sense, because it's like, but she's still not going to win, right? Like, he's still going to win.
Well, that's maybe a little bit
she's got more of a chance.
That's much less. Yeah, it's much less clear. Okay. Biden definitely was not going to win. The race has changed somewhat. There's still very much an underdog, but that's still certainly the case. But yes, the way that liberals particularly, and all the people, particularly in the Democratic establishment, as being like, wow, Joe Biden really putting country before himself, putting country before party. Someone said like, oh, wow, he really sacrificed his political career. He's 81.
What political
He's 81
also,
and he was just the president for the past 4 years.
Like, what do you mean? He gets to go fucking chill out. Why would you want to continue being? I don't know. I don't get it. I mean, I see that like this other Greens, so the Greens in the UK tweeted a similar Carly Adenia. Is that the leader?
Carly Adenia, she's a co-leader. They have co-leaders in UK Greens Party of England and Wales. And she initially tweeted, "I wish President Biden well and thank him for his many years of public service. This cannot have been an easy decision for him, but to take a decision that's personally difficult but is in the public interest is a true sign of leadership." Now,
thank him for his many years of public service is contro.
That's also a bit like, no. He did real bad things for a very long time. Crime bill, Clarence Thomas, Iraq war, like no good for a long time. Then lots of people in the, I think, Greens and the broader left in the UK generally were like, fuck off, what are you talking about? This is crazy. Particularly lots of disaffected Labour voters that have since left the UK Labour Party because Keir Starmer and its terrible position on Gaza and have joined the Greens. And so Carla Adenia followed up by saying, "For decades, successive US governments have supported the Israeli government's illegal occupation of Palestinian land, and Biden is complicit in the slaughter of innocent people in Gaza. Last night, I was positive about President Biden's decision to stand aside as a candidate. Some people read into this that I was offering my unmitigated support for his presidency, including the policy of selling arms to Israel. This is not my position. I'm sorry for not making it clearer, and that my comments left some in doubt and concerned. The next president needs to work for peace, yada, 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 yada." What do you think about that little clarification?
I mean, it's interesting. Like, there must have been some pretty sustained pressure because obviously, like there's backlash to Adam's tweet, but certainly not to a level that I think he was going to come out with a retraction of sorts. So yeah, I wonder what that kind of backlash looked like. It's interesting.
And of course, once you posted that, the right-wing people lost their minds. They're like, "Oh my God, Carly, you've been bullied by the insane hard left to back down and call this guy." I mean,
and say things that presumably they've said before, right? Like presumably all of that preamble about illegal occupation of Palestinian land and like, you know, they oppose selling arms to Israel. Yes. Like that would all be stuff that the UK Greens have said before. So.
Yes, but it is such the liberal brain, right, to be like, hey, in this moment, let's just put that aside. Let's just, hey, guys,
your principles,
let's just ignore the genocide for now, and let's just celebrate this West Wing moment in which Joe Biden is stepping down so bravely because he has literally no other choice, and he hung on for way too long anyway, and his brain is melting, and he's could potentially have cost the Democrats the election and brought back Trump anyway. But let's have a moment to feel good about ourselves.
You're right. It is West Wing brain. And it is like, that's the thing where I'm like, where Adam Bent, leader of the Australian Greens, feels the need to tweet about this. It's like everyone is like, yeah, I'm in politics, so I've got to be involved in the political moment. And it's like, you really don't, because is this like, how does this affect the core issues that you say that you are in politics to work on? And if it materially does not change that and is not like affecting people's lives in the places that you're supposed to represent, like just shut the fuck up. You don't need to have a take, I say, as a podcaster. Leave the takes to me. I'm allowed to have them.
That's all we have is takes.
Yeah. People pay for my takes.
Well, you say that. What about this little intervention from the Green Party in America? And their presidential candidate, Dr. Jill Stein. Yes, the person is in that country as well. Yeah. Joe Biden has been removed from power by the same anti-democratic forces that rigged the field for him in 2020 and skipped the primary to anoint him in 2024. Don't be fooled. The same DNC elites that put him in power will replace him with another tool for Wall Street and the war machine. We will continue to fight oligarchy, empire, and genocide like our lives depend on it, because in fact they do.
Now that is Brat.
That is both based, brat, and full of riz. So, do you think, like, if they're going to tweet, they may as well tweet something like that?
Sure. Yeah, I guess. Like, at least that's like a take about like what you believe in, right?
Well, yes, the Greens and, you know, actually progressive left-wing people, the actual left, need to take these moments. In these moments in which the Democrat Party is celebrating itself and everyone's sucking off Joe Biden and this is amazing and we all need to fall behind Kamala, to be like, no, this whole system is corrupt. It sucks, man. It really fucking sucks. And in the same way that people wanted to brush aside Hillary Clinton's record to just celebrate her as some kind of feminist hero and fall behind her, we need to say, no, you don't get to do all that. You don't fall for that media trap.
Yeah.
Both these parties are almost on a unity ticket when it comes to things like Gaza, for example. And as Jill Stein says, basically back in whatever the ruling class tells them to do, maybe with like, just listing their pronouns or whatever if they're on the Democratic side. I mean, like it's important in these places to intervene with those kind of analyses, I think.
Would you, if you were a United States citizen, would you vote for the Greens in the election for Jill?
That's a very good question, and I would probably say yes. I mean, some would argue it depends where you live. If you're in a swing state, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, Noam Chomsky said that he would be voting for the Greens, but encouraged swing voters to vote for Obama in 2012, I believe, when she was running against.
That's an interesting point.
He was running against Mitt Romney, for example. I mean, the American electoral system is so fucking. Well, it's not democratic anyway, right? Like the person who wins the most votes doesn't necessarily win the presidency, so it's insane. But generally, I mean, looking into the US Greens, I was generally impressed with them, but just very much dispirited by the fact that they do not get many votes at all. Do you know much about the US Greens at all?
No, not a whole lot. But I know that there are increasing numbers of people saying that they're going to vote Greens instead of Democrats, right?
Yes. I mean, it's completely understandable to say, hey, we're the world's greatest democracy, yet we only have two parties that, hey, sound familiar, Australia, agree on shitload of things, and there's just a general consensus between the two of them. And I think someone like Brianna Joy Gray, who's a great commentator, is sort of saying, man, if we don't look at alternative parties, third parties now, after this shit show of 2024, when the two options for a long time were 81-year-old Joe Biden or fucking Donald Trump, and are now just, Kamala Harris is just desperate, not on any kind of massive policy platform, but just to try and beat Donald Trump is coming into office. If these are the two options that this system keeps providing us, and we can't turn to third parties now, when's it going to happen?
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, it comes back to that fundamental. Or, I mean, we even have to say this in Australia, where the voting system is obviously very different. But if you want something, vote for it. And if you want the Greens, like, you have to vote for it, and the vote's never going to grow and become viable until people start voting that way. So, yeah, I mean, I was thinking about, like, thankfully have never really had to consider how I would vote in a fucking first past the post system, which should be illegal everywhere. And initially I was like, well, maybe I would have to vote for the Democrats. And then I'm like, no, I would fucking vote for what I want and try to convince other people to do that.
Well, also, it's a non-compulsory system too. So this idea, there's lots of accusations that the Greens Party are spoilers, right? That they, like in 2000, Ralph Nader ran as the Greens Party candidate, and people say that he stole votes away, and that's why George Bush won. Now, in a non-compulsory, when voting is voluntary, it's much more likely that people just don't vote at all, right? It's much more likely that, people voting Greens are either, if they didn't have the option to vote Greens, would potentially just, stay home, and it's really beholden on the parties to encourage people to both get out and vote for your party. I think the compulsory voting system is a really important material difference between Australia and America on that front.
True.
Just briefly, I know talking about American politics pains you, so we shan't go on too much longer.
It's going all right. I'm learning some things.
The US Green Party is the fourth largest party by voter registration behind the Libertarian Party. Currently have 234,000 registered voters. That's 0.19%, 0.19% of all registered voters. They peaked in 2004 when they had 319,000 registered voters. So
can I ask a stupid question though? What the fuck does you mean? Like, do you mean registered voters? Like, when you register to vote, surely you don't have to tell them who you vote for, right? It just means that they poll registered voters and do a proportion of that to estimate the number of votes. Is that right?
My understanding is when you're registered as a voter in the US, you register for a different party. You either register as a party voter or you register as an independent. You can also register as an independent as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Isn't that wild though, that you just have to tell the government who you're going to vote for as soon as you register? Like, that seems a little bit fucked.
Presumably that's all. No, people do know. Like for the Trump shooter, right? We know that he was a registered Republican. Yeah, that is kind of crazy.
Anyway, sorry, go on. I've kind of always wondered about that.
As of February this year, the Greens had 144 office holders across the US, or at least 144 office holders were affiliated with the Green Party. That's like mayors, city councillors, that kind of thing, and lots of other public office positions, but they've never had any representation in federal or statewide offices. There are some people who are associated with the Greens who are at a state level position, but they've either they don't really, that's not a big part of their candidacy, or some people were elected as Greens and then since left the party. So yeah, I don't think they really claim right now anyone at state office across the country are a Green Party member. Apparently, they identify as eco-socialist or libertarian socialist, are kind of the ideologies. They rejected, capitalism and state socialism at a party convention a little while ago. So that's sort of where they're sitting. Dr. Jill Stein has run as the candidate in 2012, 2016, and now in 2024. She lists her main priorities as being anti-war, paving the way for a Green New Deal, universal healthcare, and a pledge to stop genocide. Sounds pretty good.
Sounds good, yep.
She's 74 years old. She's a physician who studied at Harvard. She's been arrested at protests before. She talks a lot about the health effects of the climate crisis, like uses a medical background to talk about environmental factors affecting people's health, which I think is sort of important. Hates Wall Street, wants to tax the rich, slash the defense budget by 30%. Yes, please. Free higher education, nationalizing stuff. She wants 100% renewable energy by 2030, supports Medicare for all. Then there are a few sort of eccentricities. Seems like she was pro-Brexit back in the day. She's raised concern about the health effects of Wi-Fi, which is a new one. She's opposed to GMO foods in certain ways, that kind of old school hippie vibe.
Yeah.
And there were some questions about her position on vaccines, but a lot of that does seem like kind of a bit of a beat up. She said at some point there was serious concerns about the presence of mercury in some vaccines. And she says that's since been rectified, but she's certainly not a vaccines cause autism kind of person.
Yeah. Well, that seems pretty reasonable. I mean, the pro-Brexit one, I have questions because I guess I think I have heard leftist kind of critiques of the European Union, right?
Yeah. Yes, there is a thing called Lexit, which was like the left-wing critique of Brexit. People would say that Jeremy Corbyn was a critic of the EU and an Eurosceptic for quite a long time, but sort of found himself having to campaign for Remain at the time. I mean, I just think that even if that was your analysis, the success of the Leave campaign in 2016 was still, I think, bad news, generally speaking, for the left. And it's not like that's led to a left-wing social paradise in the UK.
Yeah, sure.
Can confirm.
I mean, it's interesting how much older US politicians all seem to be. Why is that? Why are they all so old?
It's pretty wild. It's a gerontocracy, yes. They do not like to retire at all.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that, the fact they retire, but it's true. It's like they're just so much older than the average Australian politician. I don't really know why exactly that is, but it is interesting.
So I think generally looking at the policy proposals, you're like, yeah, I'm on board with the US Greens, but they just don't seem to enter the race or win the votes of lots of people. Okay, the highest vote share they've ever got was in 2000 when they got 2.7% of the nationwide vote. Jill Stein's only ever got as high as 1% of the nationwide vote. In 2020, the presidential candidate Howie Hawkins got just 0.2% of the vote.
Ooh, okay.
Currently at the moment, a latest Siena poll that was published in the New York Times asking people if the presidential election was held today, who would you vote for? Kamala on 42, Trump on 42, RFK, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. 6%, Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, less than 1%.
I get the impression, like, if you had asked me, and having seen any polling, what I thought the polling was like in the States based on the discourse, I would have thought it's like 60-40 Trump, at least, not exactly on par.
Well, yes, but then that's all complicated by the fact that
the Electoral College.
Kamala can win more votes than Donald Trump and he can still become the president.
Sure.
You know what I mean? The polling's just...
Yeah, okay. But it's much closer than I thought. Like, that does put it within striking distance then.
Totally. Yeah.
I mean, all they need to do now is come out with some inspiring policies that'll change people's lives and that might actually motivate them to vote Democrat. And they're going to do that, right? Right?
So look, that's a very basic overview, like literally from Wikipedia. Perhaps one day we could get someone who's involved in the party on the show to go a bit deep dive. If there are any listeners who know more about the US Greens, please feel free to get in touch. And God, any American comrades, people living over there, just best of luck, you know.
Yeah. In keeping with your culture, we are praying for you.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in
Back in Australia, quick call to action based on the news this week that the Albanese government has approved areas of Commonwealth waters for offshore gas exploration and carbon capture and storage, which, as a reminder, is fucking fake.
That's bad.
In moves to keep fossil fuel production going past 2050. Yay!
But the climate
so much
wars
for,
are over.
I mean, even they did net zero by 2050 and we were all like, that's manifestly inadequate. And all the scientists were like, that's absolutely inadequate. And now they're like, oh, I know we said 2050 was the deadline, but we should probably keep the fossil fuels going until then.
But it's fine because we're going to be capturing all the carbon and storing it.
We're going to capture it,
so
yeah, which is the real thing that's absolutely been proven to work. No, CCS, still fucking unproven, still dangerous, still really expensive, and really just a PR exercise for fossil fuel companies to be like, it's okay, let us keep going, we're going to do something with it, we're going to put it under the bed, don't worry about it. So this week, the federal government approved permits to explore waters between SA, Victoria and Tasmania, offshore gas wells. Woo! Esso and Beach Energy are expected to take up the exploration permits for the Otway Basin, which extends from southwest SA to Tasmania, and the adjoining Sorrel Basin to the west of King Island and Tasmania. And then there's 10 permits for offshore carbon capture and storage exploration, which Green Senator Peter Whish-Wilson described as, quote, a sham and designed to do nothing more than greenwash and prolong our reliance on fossil fuels. Oh, and I see you've also put in here, this is good, the NT Labor Party has pocketed almost $60,000 from key gas industry players just months out from a critical territory election.
Yeah, that was a big thing Esther Hill was saying last week. It's just like, yeah, the gas industry has bought both sides of politics and both parties are fully on board, onshore and offshore gas.
Transition
drill,
fuel.
Baby, drill.
Yeah. Transition fuel, which, as we know, emits far more methane, which is a more potent greenhouse gas than carbon, than CO2 even. So actually very bad for the climate and a fossil fuel, and needs to stop new approvals immediately and be phased out as soon as possible.
Yes, so a call to action, there's lots of groups and particularly campaigns focused on specific gas projects. Again, solidarity, love, thank you very much for doing that hard work, and we need to keep doing it. SaveOurSonglines.org is a great organisation, a network of First Nations people fighting for justice and trying to stand against fossil fuel projects affecting their songlines and their country. I think a great thing has been the connection between the environmental movement, the climate movement, and First Nations justice, and Save Our Songlines is a great example of that. So go to the website, check them out. They're focused on a lot of stuff in Western Australia at the moment. But anywhere you see anyone trying to stop gas, help them out.
Help them out, yeah. Yeah, very good idea, because it's true. I mean, both major parties, especially the Labor Party, though, have just been completely bought by the gas industry. And it's still, like, openly speaking, in Queensland, we have opened however many tens of thousands of square kilometres for gas exploration. And like, yeah, we're doing gas and it's quote unquote natural gas, and absolutely fuck off. It is not a transition fuel. It is dirty and polluting. It is a fossil fuel and is making climate change worse. So we need to stop it. The other thing we absolutely must do is rate and review the Serious Danger podcast on Apple Podcasts to save the world. If you haven't done that already, it does help get the show in front of more people's faces and ears, I guess. Leave us a 5-star review and a nice little blurb. But also, you should follow us on social media. We're at Serious Danger AU on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. You can find links to that and the Patreon and merch. I think we have like 3 shirts left, maybe, if you want to get them. They still exist. There's just like a handful of sizes left, so you should get your hands on those before they're all gone. But that's all at seriousdangerpod.com. You can send us an email. Tell us what facts Tom has got wrong this time. hello@seriousdangerpod.com. We'll be back next week, and hopefully nothing crazy happens in US politics this week. I'm sure it'll be easy to avoid any more of that happening between now and the election. We'll never have to talk about it again.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Serious Danger Australia.